Happy Sunday, friends. Hope everyone had a good weekend. This is the Sunday scan for the week of January 31st. We have a big one. If you guys haven't been paying attention, we have FOMC on Wednesday. And boy, we have a big fork in the road coming, right? We know that a lot of the charts are looking like active distribution. And for the most part, we already kind of know where the Fed is heading in terms of directionality and what they're going to be doing. As you guys can see on the screen here, there's a 99.5% chance that we do end up having no change or a pause to see what ends up happening with inflation. We know it's starting to uptick a little bit, so usually the result of that is the Fed waiting, and they don't really react unless things start to get bad, which in my opinion is not a good recipe for success. It is what it is, right? But for the most part, they want to wait and see month over month what happens with inflation, and there's still potential that we could start to hike rates again if things start to get sticky again. But as you guys know, Trump is pretty adamant on cutting rates. He wants to keep stimulating the economy and just keep running the market hot to potentially outgrow this. But as we know, he's just kind of pushing, and the previous administration was doing this as well, and I feel like they're just going to keep pushing it onto the next term for the next president to kind of deal with, and ultimately it's going to lead into a big correction, right? It's kind of just festering the wound, in my opinion, but really comes down to what the Fed does. Do they pause? If they do pause and they don't do anything, I think we could see these distribution schematics kind of play out, as I believe the distribution is currently being priced in. Remember, distribution is a process, so if this is the result, I think we will see the market have that pullback that we're looking for. But if they kind of go along with what President Trump wants, and we do see the market get stimulated again, I think we'll see a massive injection of liquidity back into the market, and we can go higher, right? And that's kind of why I've been saying, and I'm going to switch this over to the chart now, with SPY, we definitely could see this, right, kind of turn into like a horizontal reaccumulation at the highs, right, where we do this little chopping like this, and I believe if we do inject liquidity into the market, we end up having cuts in the market, this will just extend out, right? This will pop. This will probably look something like this, if I'm being entirely honest, where we'll have a base on the high, and we'll just keep ripping, right? We'll do something like this, in my opinion. And yeah, this will prolong, obviously, the inevitable of the market having a pretty nasty sell-off. I don't know the timetable of that, but I do think we press out until like 630, 640. That's the next largest gamma pool. But if we do distribute, right, I do think that we get this schematic here where we could potentially get an upthrust, right? And I do think we're in phase B of distribution. I've talked about this, where we're probably going to get a fake break, which might have been on Friday, and then we're going to continue to mark down through these very easy gap fills that we essentially marked up through since the gap fill here on January 13th. Very easy path of least resistance through these gaps. Remember, these levels are being bid as well. I've been noting this throughout. If we take a look here at dark pools, I'll switch it back over really quickly to this. Hopefully you guys can see that. Yeah, you guys should be able to. The chart kind of gives us a good image as well, where I said we're probably going to have an accumulation low here, where they're grabbing shares, they're grabbing inventory, and they're reselling it back off these highs. And we can see that, right? A lot of the selling is now occurring off 609.70, 609.40, 609.30, and pretty large amounts. And then once they get their final fill here for majority of their position, we should have a capitulation event, and then a big sell-off right through essentially kind of like a ghost zone, right, where we have a lot of these bidders here. Once the inventory is collected here, we see the big sell-off of the highs. We have a big zone we can move through from 606.50-ish all the way down to 598, and then from 598 we might get like a lower high bounce, and then dude, you guys can see, right, and like they've set this up pretty perfectly to come all the way back down to 590, 591. That's our largest aggregate bidder, right around 591.39. And if we tie this into the chart, right, I mean it's almost perfect, right? Coming down to 591. This was what day was this? This was right after the CPI gap up. This would be the January 16th gap, and then we have another big push potentially to go to 582, which is that CPI gap, right? And from there, I think we can slowly bleed out, guys. But this would be my first target, I think, for this initial upthrust phase, or phase B of distribution. From here, absolutely could get some kind of mega rally back up to the highs again. Maybe get some, like, I'm not going to speculate too much, but we could get like our UTAD here, and then a break back down, and then a big flush all the way to 561. 561 is still my target, but right, I think the most important thing is just to focus on this phase B, and 582 is our target if the Fed does pause, if the Fed decides to pivot. Right, I told you guys my biggest focus here is going to be MU. MU is without a doubt my favorite chart. Especially if we can, get some kind of big bounce if the Fed does end up cutting rates, right? I think we can get an easy markup play above 114.80. If it bases here, I think we have a straight trajectory up to 127.81 with that 130 or the 125 call. I still think that's the move. But really kind of comes down to what happens on Wednesday, right? I really have no other way to put it. It comes down to a very situational thing. And usually the market's not like that. Something's usually priced in and you can see it actively happening, which I've stated is distribution. But we could see a pivot where we start to accumulate in this little zone here, as I've said, right? In this little chop phase. I'll redraw it and we just start to kind of accumulate here. Let me delete this. And Fed decides to pivot. Okay, well we've had our accumulation range off of the lows. They mark it up. We get a pullback off of that high. Shorts are trapped, and then we have that big spring up. So it really comes down to Wednesday, and I can't emphasize it enough to be, I wouldn't say reactionary, but kind of have like a two-pathway thing in your brain of what could happen. It's important not to get caught off sides too early with too much size. So that's pretty much that. I still like SPY. I like SPY more than NVIDIA personally, right? Just because of the path of least resistance and how gappy this is to the downside. We could see a pretty nasty flush, especially considering, which I've brought up multiple times, the margin rates that we're currently seeing. From a lot of the clients. IBKR released it, Schwab released it. This is the highest margin utilization rate we've ever seen, right? Now, obviously we're at highs, but people aren't using their margin down here when things don't look good or there's the structural higher lows to be taking it off of. People are all levered up here, which is kind of scary, considering how bullish things are sound. Trump. There's a lot of Trump kind of like slurping going on. I don't know if there's a better word I can use. Just people think this is going to go up just because of Trump. So from kind of like that perspective versus the chart, this is set up perfectly for some kind of bull trap. And like I said, these are inactive distributions. And I want to tie this into NVIDIA now. NVIDIA, we already saw the potential LPSY, right? I already kind of talked about this in the recap of my first loss down here off of this progression gap where I thought we could have it. Remember, I thought this was the bar that was going to send us, but we marked up a little bit higher into this progression gap off of the NWOG here, right at 148.59. We sold pretty perfectly off of that, had a bearish engulfing. I do think that this bounces, right? We got pretty close to it on Friday. We took that 1 week out short to 140. Those went like almost 100%, so congrats if you guys took that once again. But I do expect us to bounce off of this 140.83 gap and likely retest the bottom of the progression gap, right? It's going to retest this like 144 spot into the most recent gap, kind of the same exact spot, honestly, right around 144, 145. And then from there, I think we could continue the sell-off and then move all the way back down to this level here, right? And this is the big spot. And we talk about absorption, right? Remember, the more, and it's easier to see sometimes with like a bear, or like, I guess like if you flip this to an inverted bull chart, right? We see this all the time where this level is being absorbed. So imagine these are sellers. There's passive sells here. We take out some passive sells. We pull back down. We accumulate. We push back up. We end up absorbing the sellers. We push down. We push back up. We absorb the sellers. And eventually, right, we get one major higher low, and we push this again, and then we have the ability to rip because these guys have been essentially absorbed. There's a reason I showed the shop chart, because shop was very, very similar back here, right? We've talked about how this zone right here, kind of the same concept, absorption, capitulation event for the final, I would say the final, like the spring or the final liquidity grab that they were looking for. And we had a really easy markup with very, very little resistance to get through it. We filled the gap. We based that old kind of, I would say absorbed supply, and then we ripped again, right? Kind of the same exact thing that we could see with NVIDIA here. Just inverse, right? Almost the same exact thing. This would just be to the downside. So if that is to happen, I'm telling you guys, I think this this 130 level, 129 level finally cracks, and we'll probably retest it from the low. That's another opportunity to enter in. And I do think that this ultimately comes to 118 to 116. I'm still holding on to the longer dated June contracts to give myself some flexibility to add in. Like I said, we're swinging here, and it's not so much about pinpointing the perfect 618 entry or getting the ideal entry, like sniping it. It's about letting daily candles close, letting these bars show you the directionality with not only the bar itself but also the volume backing it. And I think we saw one of our footprint candles actually come through on Friday. Higher volume here after the 2-bar consolidation in this progression gap, right? And now it's just about kind of adding along the way and adding into a winner, because so far this is a winner. This is looking good. So if it does retest 144, I think it's pretty simple where we can keep our risk now right off of that Friday high, which is 148, 149. I don't think this has a need to go all the way back up to 152. So looking at this, right, if we were able to get an entry right around here, I would risk somewhat either at the level perfectly or a little bit above to give myself some breathing room. And then we're looking for this to move all the way down to 116.43. Okay, so pretty nice trade there. There'd be a 5-hour trade. I absolutely think this could work. With all the DeepSeek stuff going on with FOMC, I think this is one of the names that could lead the downside kind of move, to be honest. So between SPY and this, these are probably the only 2 shorts I want to take. I know Apple I still have a position on. I just don't want to have 3, right? I don't want to have 3 different names that I'm short on when I can just take 2, right? It seems illogical. It's unnecessary in my opinion, but I do have a position here still. Just don't think I'm going to add into this one, but definitely, I think this is going to bounce here. Maybe retest the gap down that we had from I think this was the Pelosi news, right, where she ended up stating her position. Obviously, that's like a month late, so she started to sell probably into strength up here, late December, I'm sorry. But we did get kind of our retest here. We sold down. We're probably going to pop up into the gap and then sell again. This really starts to get gross, in my opinion, underneath 216 to 213. And as I said before, right, we have a pretty open field day underneath that 213. Very, very little support built between, June 6th to where we are currently, right? And there's only I would say one higher low here, this capitulation event here. So not really an established bid where we have a ton of volume that's going to support price. I think this could melt down. So, just holding a little bit of contracts for a big win here seems the most logical, right? And really attacking NVIDIA and or SPY more aggressively. So, yeah, that's pretty much it for the short side. Just really comes down to what happens on Wednesday, if I'm being completely honest. So a little bit of hands-off. But I do want to talk about value investing. I've been talking about this a lot, and I think this is a good opportunity to get shares on a lot of names. And this is where I wanted to tie things into AMD, Nike. I was looking at a couple more. Intel's obviously a good one, so let's jump into the long side and kind of break those down. So AMD, remember, if the market does sell, I do think this is going to break 121.83, but it's okay. My risk is still 115.60. The drawdown on this, like I said, would probably be like 5 to 8% at the most. So not that big of a loss, but there's a reason I've been very specific on not taking options on this one. I just want to take shares, get a position on this one, and just in case this has relative strength, and we see a lot of the froth get taken out of NVIDIA, which has been the primary leader of tech of the entire market. We could see some of these names really outperform. So I still like AMD here. Remember, it kind of broke above 121.83. I got the pullback day, I think, on this or somewhere on one of these pullback days into it. Risk is off of that 115, and technically it should be a little bit lower off 114.40 since that's the low. And just seeing, right, if we can get some kind of hold here, maybe a little bit lower, and it reclaims. But I'm looking to hold this trade. I really don't see a reason to overthink it. I did expect somewhat of a rejection off of this progression gap here. Ideally, it just holds, right, and it doesn't end up selling too harshly with the market. But yeah, just one of those names I'm just kind of keeping my eye on. Not too picky with adding again or trying to get the perfect average. I like what I currently have. I think my average, I'm up like 6% or something like that, or 5% or something like that. So not too worried about this one, but I just wanted to touch on this one because I do think it could pull underneath that 121.83 level. Just still keeping my risk right off of that 114.40 low, and won't be that big of a loss if it does end up kind of pulling deeper than that. And still, I have the flexibility to give it a weekly candle close, multiple dailies, whatever I feel is necessary, and that's the luxury of having those shares. But if this does end up holding and performing well relative to the market sell-off that we could see, I definitely think that we could really have a big pop up into 132. That's the major level I'm looking at. This is that old internal low, or that higher low that kind of sent us into this 170 spot. That's the next level I'm looking for it to be claimed. And remember, I think we could get a pop above, pull back and retest, and then kind of trade into this gap, maybe sell back down, chop around a little bit, and then from there, I think we can push into this 144 level, pull back and hold, right? I've gone over this multiple times. Don't want to delve too deeply into that one, but Nike is another good one. I know Pat's been on this one. If you guys have seen Joe's in the Discord now too, I really like this name still, right? I've just been kind of patient with this one. I know a lot of people were looking to snipe the lows right around here, right, which it obviously pulled down into, but I've been a little bit more patient, waiting for it to reclaim this old COVID gap, right? You guys got to remember the COVID gap was massive here from March of, this March 24th, just the COVID gap. I guess that's the best way to word it. Remember, we ended up having a sell-off from earnings into this level. We had our 3 lower low accumulation. We kind of popped and didn't have enough inventory. We pulled back to the kind of like the footprint candle or the gap down open. Really held right here. We ripped again, didn't have enough inventory to go all the way higher, and then it pulled all the way back down into this old accumulation zone. And it essentially pulled right back down into the lows from where that 3 lower low occurred, right? Now, I've just been patient, waiting for it to pop back above, and we got that, right? And we were essentially pulling right back into this spot. Volume's still really low. I wish we would have seen a higher volume bar to give me a little bit more confirmation, but this looks pretty damn good to kind of take shares right around the 72.33 level and then risk, right, whatever this low is, right? Because it lines up pretty nice with the 3 lower lows from the previous range, right, wherever this was back in July. So this is kind of what I'm looking at. It's pretty similar to AMD in a small sense. So I'm kind of looking at something like this. I would be looking for this to eventually rip through. You guys can already see I have a progression gap marked here. So if it can claim back above 75.10 to 76, right? So let's say it kind of pops here, it rips. I would look for it to obviously hit the top, reject, pull back and flag, hold, pop, pull back above the top, and then our first target I'm really looking at is the 79.86 level, right? This is a big resistance. It's a very big gamma and psych level at like this $80 level. If we can get through that, right, I think this is a clear pathway for it to break in base, maybe consolidate, and then I really think that this can trade upwards into this gap up here, right? 85 to like 87. And dude, I really think that this could be really building up enough liquidity here at the lows to finally get that oomph to push up into the 95 gap. Now, if you think about this, guys, if we can get it all the way to 95 with shares, this is an insane trade, guys. This is an 11-hour trade, right around, what's the percent on this? I can't see it on here. Oh, it's up at the top. Yeah, 30% gain on shares. I'll take that all day, every day, right? And I feel like this would be a really big beneficiary too from tariffs. If they take some of their business away from China and they bring it back to the United States, they have an incentive from a tax perspective. Obviously, more jobs coming in the United States. But on top of that, guys, I think they're going to facilitate a lot of the work they were giving to kind of the labor overseas that was essentially cheap. They're going to automate that, and I think they can make even tighter budget cuts from that and be able to perform really well over the next year, 2 years, 3 years, etc. So really excited to see what this name does. People are always going to wear clothes. I think this name kind of just caught some bad timing with a lot of the stuff in the I'm trying to figure out the right word. Just the conflict that was going on between the United States and China, right? And I think this name will do very well. I think the best route for this is shares, so I absolutely love this name. I'm glad a lot of the guys in the Discord have kind of kept up with this name and haven't really let it slip away, because I've been guilty and I've moved on to other charts. But this is one of those names, man, that will really pay off long term, in my opinion, as long as you kind of play it right. And I think the best way to play it right and not overthink it is shares. So I'm going to take a position this week, 100%, and that's really what I'm looking for. Yeah, we can get to 95, we can get to 100 would be the next spot, and this really has a clean pathway all the way up to 122, right? And if we're able to have an entry down here, which may seem risky relative to the upside targets, it's not that risky, guys. And this could be This could be a banger, man. I don't know how long it would take, but if it can get all the way back up to that spot, that's almost a 70% gain. Um, Dude, I think it's worth it. So Nike's one of those big names that I'm keeping an eye on, just where it opens on Monday, and I will be taking a share entry on this one as well. And you guys know I have Intel position as well. This could be, in my opinion, the pullback, right? This could be the LPS. It could go a little bit lower. Right, this is kind of like I would say like our automatic reaction. This is that little level a little bit higher. It looked like it pulled back down. We didn't get a spring like I would have liked to have seen. Maybe it kind of undercuts the lows at 1858, but we did get a pop back above. This thing looks like, I wouldn't say picture perfect accumulation, but it's damn near close. And I really like how it rejected off of this high here. We had a very, very high volume hammer that reclaimed like these daily sequence highs. And then it popped, it rejected this old gap down, right, which in my opinion is kind of like our sell climax, and now it's pulling back on low vol. We did have a higher vol day here on Friday, but it still managed to hold above 2080. I really like this level here and kind of just risking the lows off 1858. And I'm expecting big shit, man. I'm expecting big stuff. I would like to see us pop out above 2198. If we can pull back and base 2198, I think we're in the clear, and I really think this has an easy trajectory for potential creek jump, right, up into like 2459-ish. If it can hold here, I think we have a clear pathway up to 29, guys. And if you guys don't remember 2459, or this old floor back here, right, this old floor, really just a very, very key SR flip that if we can hold that, I think we could see some of these shorts that got caught in this lower range get kind of squeezed out, and we're still looking for that move to 29, which is this floor's low. We've talked a lot about like the 3 lower low. In my opinion, this is setting up, guys. This is setting up pretty special because we had kind of one here, we had one here, we had one here, and you guys can see all the volume is essentially at the low here without a new low being made. Always something that I'm looking at, some kind of an anomaly like that. I think this chart could do something real special, man. A lot of rumors about buyouts too. Their earnings is obviously coming up on January 30th, so I'm avoiding any options trade on this one, and I really like the share idea on this too. If we can get what we're looking for, I mean, if we just take a look from an RR perspective of our risk is like right around, our entries here, risk is at the lows here. It's about a 10% drawdown, but if we actually get the pop that we're looking for, I think this can go up into, like the gap fill at 29. It's almost a 40% upside move that on a 10% downside risk. That's sick, right? But I think this can really have an insane 2025, 2026 that moves up to these old dark pool prints that I was talking about a long time ago that never filled, up into 37 to 38. That's an 80% return. And then you have to think, man, if this thing can continue to trend, there's a gap that's unfilled here back into this February 41 range. Unfilled gap at like 43, and that would be 100% return on equity. That's a massive, massive trade, guys. So absolutely love this idea. Another thing too, LRCX. I think I did this backward, guys. I probably should have taken shares on this one too, or maybe not have taken this at all. But I'm a little bit too late, and I'm kind of locked into this trade, right? This is the one I took via options. How it kind of broke above this 79.60 resistance. It pulled back on lower volume, right, as you guys can see from volume perspective as well as the bar perspective. We saw a nice buyer step in at the end of the day that really wicked this back above 79.60. But dude, if this name has earnings as well on the 29th, if it can get some kind of pop, I think this is the same exact thing where it can get above 85.80 and then start to trend from there. Really key spot, man. I really have no other way to word this. This was the old higher low. Clearly, lower highs and a large resistance was formulated here off 85.80. And if it can get back above that, man, I really think that we can see a big, big move up into 101 to 106. And I've talked a lot about the analogy from people hearing about gold, the gold rush, and a lot of people traveled west to go get the gold, and that was all the hype into AMD, Nvidia, and these AI names, and they got there and they're like, "Fuck, dude, we don't have shovels, we don't have the necessary tools," and that's why I think a lot of these names like the manufacturers, which is LRCX, TSM, right? They're a huge name for a lot of these people, because a lot of these, like Nvidia, AMD, they don't actually produce their own chips. They have the ideas, but they facilitate a lot of the work and a lot of the products to other people. TSM's big. You guys saw with MU, that was a big thesis on MU. A lot of their memory components actually come from MU, and dude, yeah, so these are all setting up, right? So that's a big name that I'm looking at. As I said, I have options on this one. I probably should have taken shares as well. So I have a little bit more risk on the table with Lam Research, but I'm pretty confident in this name. I really think that's it, right? Nothing else that I really want to talk about. MU, I already went over. Oh yeah, a couple other ones that I wanted to talk about short side that I wanted to add on here. Potentially Palantir. Palantir, I know this is kind of a hot name right here, but it does give the exact thing that I'm looking for. I think Joe brought it up, Rocco brought it up. I saw some people floating it around. I brought it up like a week and a half ago when I saw Kramer saying that they're going to keep going and they could do no wrong. It was really weird, the timing of it, but pretty nasty shooting star candle here off of this old high. This could be the up thrust, and it's very similar to NVIDIA and a lot of these other distribution schematics where if we can potentially, sell down a little bit, maybe get a buyer and then at lower highs right before 80.91 and then it starts to continue down, I think we can have a nice trade off of that one and then look for the break of structure here, right? Very simple, and I do think that this can push down into 63.40. Just depends on Monday if we see continuation off of this bar. But looking at it on the weekly, this looks like a fizzled out higher high attempt, right? Where we had highs up here, potentially distribution into this bar here with the up thrust. It sold down, caught a higher low. Hey, there's a potential that this makes a new high, and it didn't do that. It pushed up on even lower volume, kind of failed the high here. So if it is going to break down, the spot it's going to break down to would be here, right? Very simple range to range trade. So 63.40, something I'm watching. Just need to see how this ends up playing out. So this is definitely on watch. If this were to really fall apart, guys, I think that this name could come down all the way into this gap down here, right? And that would be a disgusting trade. 41 to 47. Let's say we just snipe the top, which is not going to happen, but that would be roughly a 40. We can cut this trade in half, man, on the equity. So pretty crazy opportunity there. And then I am watching Hood too. This could be a UTAD here. There's a lot of high volume up here with a lot of these bars almost exhausting out from a spread perspective. So I am watching for signs of distribution and signs of exhaustion. If it starts to sell, kind of the same thing as Apple. I want to see it pull back down to these old highs here. If it can bounce and give us a weak bid and some kind of lower high, I would be okay entering. And as long as it's kind of close to the high here, I'd be okay entering. Otherwise, I would wait for it to break under, retest here, and I think we can catch like a shorter dated trade off of this rejection, and then look for where's it at? The gap fill here, right? So 42 to like 39. If worst case scenario, we don't catch this lower high up here, we can enter here, go shorter dated, and catch the move from 42 to like 39. So those are pretty much the only other ones that I'm really interested in. That's really it, guys. I was thinking about adding into Lulu. I've had a position on Lulu for a while into the March 480s. I'm down a little bit on them. I think I'm down like 50% or something, but I really haven't touched them too much because they're spready. But really nice gap trap that we've seen multiple times underneath this peg low. The weekly looks absolutely fire, right? It looks like it's just kind of baiting down beneath that 377. Really strong name here. And I'm just going to hold this, right? If we end up catching a big rip, it should go through 416 pretty easy. And I think it has a clean pathway up into 478. Their earnings, though, are March 31st, so this would require a move prior to its earnings relative to the expiration I have. But this is something I have as well that I'm just kind of holding to see what ends up happening with it. But yeah, that's really it, guys. I just wanted to kind of cover everything. Going to be sitting on my hands pretty much Monday and Tuesday. Unless I see something in pre-market, I'll let you guys know in the pre-market chat. Like, hey, I'm looking to take a quick day trade. I'll let you guys know the strike, the stock, the reasoning, etc. I'll obviously alert it as well. But that is no guarantee, right? But for the most part, I'm pretty much waiting until the Fed's decision on Wednesday. And then it's time to get aggressive, whatever ends up happening, right? Either they cut, I'm looking at MU, and I think a lot of the other names that I have in shares and some of the passive names that I have with options should do really well. Or if the market decides to pause and we see the distribution play out, it's NVIDIA and it's and SPY. Those are the main two. So quick little thing for you guys. Hope you guys enjoy. Hopefully this isn't too long. I think this is 16 minutes, and the first part of this is about 8, so 25 minutes. Shouldn't take much of your time. I think I covered everything I needed to cover as well. Really, dude, I'm really, really, really excited. I rarely get super excited for things like this, but there's just so much potential, and I think we can really, really make a lot of money from Q1 here and kind of cover us up into Q2, Q3. Um, yeah, and these are the trades you live for, man. There's a lot of them that are kind of surrounding us, and I've dictated it, or I've not dictated it, but I've been able to narrow it down to like 3 or 4 names, which I'm very happy about. So that's going to be all. I will see you guys on Monday in pre-market. If there's anything I'm going to day trade, other than that, I'm just going to kind of hang around and sit and chat. But I'll see you guys tomorrow.